Welcome to the Love Deep Lab podcast, helping you integrate sex, sexiness, sacredness, and science in your life and your bedroom. And now, your host, Dr. Stormy.
Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Stormy. Thanks for joining us today on the Love Deep Lab podcast. Today, we are going to talk about something so near and dear to my heart. We are going to jam out on sacred sexuality. And for those of you listening or watching, you may be like, I don't know if I want that. I don't know what that even is. I've heard of like sting and tantra, and that's about it, and all these other things. So we're going today to really get into the beauty, the magic, the alchemizing power of sacred sexuality, and what the potential of bringing sexuality and sacredness together for those of you that are listening that are single, for those of you listening that are partnered. I'm just so excited to share this incredible practice and to welcome you to this journey today. And I have an amazing guest with us who is a friend and colleague of mine. And we're going to introduce you now to Rakaya Mitchell. So Rakaya is a certified sex, love, and relationship coach specializing in men's sexuality and women's empowerment through the Tantric Institute of Integrated Sexuality. She has been traveling the world for the past 15 years, much of that living as a global nomad, exploring sexuality in different cultures and studying Eastern spirituality such as Tantra and Taoism. She now resides part-time in Salt Lake City, Utah, and part-time in the Riviera Maya, Mexico, working in person and virtually with clients and also offering workshops and one-on-one retreats. She is passionate about helping others to heal blockages in intimacy and to integrate spirituality with sexuality. Welcome, Rakaya.
Thank you so much, Stormy, for having me on today.
I'm so happy to share time with you, and I'm just so excited for our listeners and our watchers to get to experience your magic and your power, so thank you for joining.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
So this is as much of a passion for you as it is for me, and I'm just so excited to share with our listeners and share some time and space. But I guess I would just start with asking you a little bit about your journey, like what brought you into sacred sexuality, both in your own life and also in your profession.
Yeah, that is quite a long journey indeed. So I'm not going to take up too much time on that topic. But basically, Stormy, I was tired of getting bored and becoming complacent in relationships. It seems that I would always reach a dead end with partners sexually, or they would, and then one of us would stop engaging sexually, or it would just plateau out, and, we would lose the excitement and passion. And I think this is so common in a lot of relationships. And then oftentimes one or both partners start looking outside of the relationship, and, goes from there. And then you eventually stop feeding the relationship. So I was in a relationship with a Tantric adept, actually, about 13 years ago. And at the time, I was in what I call my primal sexual prime years, versus what I now refer to as my spiritual sexual prime years. And this partner who was this Tantric adept, I think that he just couldn't do the lusty, primal stuff that my body thought it needed at the time. And he was more into the energetics, the energy orgasms that you can experience once you go down this path and learn how to cultivate that energy. And so he stopped engaging with me sexually after about a year of being together. And so I was basically left on my own to figure out my journey and to figure out what to do with all that pent up energy. And I started teaching myself how to play with that energy, how to cultivate it, after much frustration, of course. And so I started self-teaching myself basically Taoist practices in the art of learning how to channel and circulate that sexual energy. So that's one of the ways that really kickstarted me into the path of sacred sexuality.
I love it. Oh, I love it. And you're just so beautiful inside out. And I know for you, because I've gotten to know you a bit, that part of that is this practice for you. And I would say the same for me, like how to one of the things I'm sure we'll get into is that how living a life, a path, a practice of sacred sexuality doesn't just stay in the bedroom. It permeates into all aspects of your life.
Yeah, completely agree with that.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Celebrate your journey, and you're still on it.
Yeah.
So beautiful. For me, similarly, I had a tantric lover that introduced me to tantra and tantric sexuality about 14 years ago. And then he was kind of just dabbling, and then I took it and just voraciously devoured it. Every book I could read, every class I could take, every workshop, every tantra festival. And I, 14 years later, am just as in awe and reverence and fascination with this beautiful practice. So,
wow, I love that we have similar beginnings to the journey and almost similar timelines. That's really interesting.
I know, it is.
I didn't realize that.
And one of the things I love about this work that we get to do with our clients, a deep part of which is sacred sexuality, is that I'm in the practice right along with my clients. I hope I'm practicing to my last breath, right? And I hope I'm practicing with my last orgasm too.
Yes, totally.
Amazing. So what would you say, Rakaya, for, I'd imagine some of our listeners are familiar with sacred sexuality and tantric and Taoist practices, and many are not. So how would you begin to describe, or how would you describe sacred sexuality and what that means to you?
You know what? I actually looked up the word sacred in, I think it was maybe Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to read to you part of what it said there. It says the word sacred describes something that is dedicated and set apart for service or worship. It is considered worthy of spiritual devotion and respect and can inspire awe or reverence.
Oh, love that.
So that's Wikipedia's. Mine doesn't sound quite as good. My translation would basically be all of that, plus, the integration of love, presence, and intentionality to create something sacred. Because basically, what makes something sacred is merely the intention of making it sacred, is what I believe. And so it's also the art of bringing in something sacred and therefore something spiritual into the art of sexuality.
I love that. And for our listeners who might not know, for so long in more ancient practices, sexuality and spirituality were very merged and then became very separated, sort of like church and state sort of separation. And so I think part of this is this beautiful reclamation of integrating two worlds that can be seemingly separate in a lot of our cultural, norms and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And in regards to intention and bringing the intentionality into the sacredness, it's like you can light a candle just to light a candle, right? Or you can light a candle with an intention to create it as a sacred object for ceremony. So there's a big difference.
Yeah, and I love what you mentioned about, intention and presence. And I worked with Deborah Eden Toll, who's an amazing, I took a workshop with her. She's an incredible meditation teacher. And she said, wherever we put our full attention is sacred. And that has just always stuck with me. I just love that. And so I would just say to our listeners and our watchers, when was the last time you gave your lover or yourself, if you are your own lover in that moment, your full attention, full presence, full devotion, full adoration. And it's just something really powerful to reflect on, maybe as you listen through this podcast, but to look at that with curiosity instead of judgment or, anything else, shame, judgment, all the other things that we can bring out, but just to really be curious about when was the last time you kissed your partner with full, reverence and curiosity even, but let alone made love to them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We get we think we know our partners in and out instead of inviting ourselves to see them as new people every single day. That's something that Osho talked about, Osho. And, I'm actually a sannyasin of Osho, and he talks about how, what if we could wake up every single morning and observe this person next to us in bed as a stranger and get to know them every day as someone new?
That's so beautiful. I love that.
Instead of taking for granted the person we think we know, because the truth is that we're always evolving. We are always becoming a new being, a new person.
Mm-hmm. True. I love that. And, I think one of the things that I see with couples that I work with, or that are, thinking of working with me, or that I hear and know in my own life, is that exactly what you mentioned, Rakaya, like that there's this, and it's not malicious, but there can be this taking that person for granted. There can be that thinking they're always going to be there. There can be that, oh, I'll get to knowing them in that way later. And, I always like to remind anyone, myself included, that we have full choice to be in partnership or not, and so does our partner at any and every moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it keeps me, I don't know, it keeps me on point, keeps me open and curious about knowing my partner. But I love what you said, that we are all always evolve, hopefully till our last breath in evolution.
Yeah, I love what you said too about like choosing in, like that we always have a choice. I had a partner who would say to me every single day, today I'm choosing in today to be in love with you. I'm choosing in today to love you and be in partnership. And I just kept thinking, that's so cool. Every single day we get to meet each other in that moment and tell each other that we're opting into this. This is a conscious choice.
So beautiful. I love that. It's very sexy too.
It was sexy.
Awesome. It was beautiful. So how, if we want to start to bring sacredness, I think sacred gets such a bum rap these days. Like I said, like cultural messaging and possible like harm caused from different religions, or family of origin, all the things. But if we want to begin to practice bringing sacredness into sex, into sexuality, into partnered sex or single sex, how would you suggest that our listeners begin to bring sacredness in?
Yeah, I think really, you hear this catchphrase thrown around about being present. And that's another one of those, spiritual catchphrase words that people, it's fun to say, but do we really know what it means, kind of a thing. And I've seen a couple of polls done by particularly women, like what do women really want in sex, right? Like what's their number one thing? And it pretty much all boiled down to presence from their partners. Mm-hmm. And I actually believe this is true even if you're not in partnership or whatever your sexual preferences are. But I think really, and that's kind of the same thing as intention, it's deciding to be really super present and online in each moment with our experience, whether that be in a moment of eye gazing with our partner, or in a kiss, or in the act of lovemaking, or with ourselves as we're self-pleasuring, or even as we look at ourselves in the mirror first thing in the morning. We always have an opportunity to be present and to even eye gaze with ourselves and say, I choose to love you today. I choose to feel pleasure today. And I choose to be present for you today.
Oh, I love that. So presence.
Yeah,
and you're right. It is a buzzword. It's a good one, but it's a buzzword that I think maybe it's beautiful to hear a little bit more depth about what does that mean to be present, right? Especially in our world, it's so data driven and multitasking driven, which actually, like now we know the research, like most of us actually legitimately can't multitask, right? So we're really just diffusing our attention and our presence. But soul focused, to be solely focused on, like you said, yourself or your partner or your partners, is really a beautiful way to begin to bring in some of that sacredness. That's such a great tip.
Yeah. And, I think we'll be going into and doing a little mini practice. So I will give you a practice of going into the body and actually feeling on a sensational level how to bring more presence into the body. So we can do a little practice around that.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's number one on the list. Do you want me to go a little bit deeper into this question?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And we're kind of getting there early, which is good, but our listeners all know I do what we call sexy homework every week, which is how can they begin to practice in an embodied way, what it is that we're talking about. And so, yeah, so for your first sexy homework from Rakaya is practicing presence, being really deeply present with yourself, with your lover, with your kiss, with your lovemaking. So that's the first sexy homework. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mentioned eye gazing. That's not a lot of people. That's not something that a lot of people know about or do necessarily, or not necessarily on a conscious level. But that's just another way that we can bring in sacredness into sexuality. And again, you can do this with yourself in the mirror, and just take a moment to, whether it's with yourself or your partner, to just eye gaze with them. And just be present with, what are you feeling in this moment? And just noticing, is your mind wandering? Or are you actually really listening and just in a state of silence and just enveloping the other person's essence through your eyes?
Beautiful. And if you, for any of you that haven't tried it, I absolutely, just the coattail of for Rakaya, it's such a powerful practice. I think eye gazing is fabulous. And all of the awkwardness or emotion or discomfort that may arise in the practice is welcome. It's part of it. It's learning to be present. Like you said, it's not just all the like being present with all the awesome stuff. It's also being present with anything that feels uncomfortable. And that is such a beautiful suggestion.
Yeah, exactly. And, and in regards to the uncomfortable, that's when we get an opportunity. This is something I've learned in my Tantra trainings. That's when we get the opportunity to what they call clear the psychic space. So before lovemaking, just taking 15 minutes to have a conversation with your partner, even 5 minutes to have a conversation, and just dropping in with them. How are you doing? Do you, is there anything in your emotional field, as they call it, or is there anything going on for you or that's between us that we need to resolve? Is there anything that we need to clear before we go, before we engage in intimacy? So that can be super, super helpful, because oftentimes when partners have sex and they make love and one partner has or is holding on to some resentment about something, it can really taint the energy of the experience at times.
That is a beautiful suggestion. I love that.
Yeah. So it's like an opportunity to purify the energy. Let's just clear it. Let's just get that out of the way.
Let's get that. And then we can get funky. That's amazing. I love that tip. It's so beautiful. So those are fabulous practices for our listeners to practice this week. And why, I would ask you, Rakaya, why would they want to practice sacredness? Why would they want to bring in sacred sexuality? What would you say? And I know you and I can cheerlead for it all day long, but why would someone want to be intentional in this practice?
Well, Stormy, sex can be incredibly shallow, and I'm not saying that people are just having shallow sex, but it can also be earth-shattering ecstasy and a union with the divine, right?
Yes.
So,
yes. Amazing.
I mean, and anywhere in between, of course.
Totally.
But that's the kind of energy that, I mean, once you've experienced that, you don't really want to go back to mundane sex.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's so funny. I love that you just said it, because I was saying, until 14 years ago, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
I thought I would have said I was having really good sex. And now it's not that it was bad, because I don't have any judgment. Yeah. It's just like you said, it's apples and oranges. It's like on separate planets.
Yes.
When I'm practicing sacred sexuality with myself or a partner versus having more mundane sex or more genital only or physicality based sex, it is just apples and oranges. So I totally love it.
It's the kind of stuff that it really excites me to the core to talk about and to teach. And it even lends into sex magic, which when you're using that energy correctly, when you're using that energy in a purified way, when you're using it in a sacred way and in reverence and devotion, that is the kind of energy that is here for us to give birth to whatever we desire in life. It is powerful. It is potent. It is magic, and literally is the stuff of creation.
Totally. I love that. And I love to say, like, we literally all came from sex, right? Sexual energy, but it is the only force that I know of in all my science training that has the ability, like you just said, to create life, right?
Yeah.
A lot of other really powerful energies focus on destruction, like atomic energy, nuclear energy, things like that, fission energy. But the energy of sex has the potential, has that much fucking power to create life, you know? And then, like you said, with sex magic, which is one of my favorite practices, is where you don't have to put that into orgasm. You can, but you can put it wherever you want. You can learn to shift it, transmute it, move it, transform it into whatever you are desiring in your life. And I think that is an incredible practice that you just mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. You know, what's funny is that I taught myself sex magic many years ago, and then I learned about it in my tantra trainings as well. And I was like, hey, dang, I knew this stuff. And and I was
there
like,
was some wise part of you that just knew.
Well, I've really been blazing my own path in a lot of ways. And it was really exciting because I was like, who can I tell about this? When I was first learning about it, it was like, I didn't have colleagues. I was just discovering this on my own. And I remember like trying to tell friends that might seem open to it.
Yes. So I love that so much. My first experience with sex magic was at a tantra festival with like 200 people in the room, like at least, that's my memory, 200 people in the room. And, some people making love, other people just dancing, some people meditating, doing whatever you were wanting to do with full consent, of course. But it was the power, like the energy, like actually talking about it gives me full body chills, the energy in the room. And I was not in a sexual encounter with myself or anyone else in the moment. I was just sitting more in meditation, was just mind-boggling. The amount of energy and love and presence in the room was pretty phenomenal. It was a pretty cool experience.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure I have some experiences like that as well that I could tell you about.
We can share stories.
For sure.
But to your point about you wanted to tell anyone who would listen that could be receptive to it. I like when I'm really deep in my own practice of sacred sexuality with my partner. I have a boyfriend, and he's amazing to practice with me. But I will, when we are having that kind of sex that's like mind bending, mind-boggling, time-bending, earth-shattering, ego-destroying sex. I literally, like, afterwards, I'm always like, I want everyone I love to be able to make love like that. Like, how different of a world would we have,
Right. Yes, exactly.
And there's this funny thing. I really want, like, everyone I love to be able to, and they can, with these practices, make love like that. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and with yourself, with oneself. Absolutely. It's just as possible as having a partner. So
I love that. And that, because we have a lot of listeners that are single, and so thank you so much, Rakaya, for bringing light to that. But absolutely. And when I work with clients, I'm sure you as well, like I teach single bodied, solo bodied practice and two bodied practice. Even if you're in partnership, often the practice is really beautiful to start with self, and self as the beloved and self as the lover, and then to bring it into two body or more practice.
I love what you just said. The self is the beloved. That very much speaks to the foundations of how I teach as well.
Beautiful. Oh, I think I just thought of my next tattoo. I have a lot of them.
I think we're already using this energy to manifest the tattoo design.
That's amazing. Beautiful. So that was actually one of my questions about working for singles too. So you just so beautifully shed some light on that. But I'd love it if you would lead us in just a somatic practice, right? These practices are of the body and of our yonis and our lingams. And so you would just lead us in a short practice, and I will just say my little mom energy comes out. So for all of you listening or watching, join us if you safely can, if you're not driving or running or anything like that. But I will write in the show notes the time so that you can revisit this practice that Rakaya is going to lead us through at any time.
Okay, great. Thank you. So go ahead and close your eyes. And just starting to be mindful of your breath as you start to take deeper and longer breaths, and letting the exhale come all the way out. As you inhale, visualize the breath going down inside of your body. And as you exhale, letting it fall out your mouth on an exhale. On the inhale, sending it deeper until you can feel it reaching all the way down into your pelvic bowl. And then exhaling, release. On your next inhalation, see if you can send it all the way down to touch your genitals from the inside. And then releasing as you exhale. As you continue to breathe and inhale, saying hello to your genitals, tickling them with your breath. And start to notice if there is a response. So with the breath touching the genitals or the bottom of the pelvic bowl, just saying hello and noticing any sensations. You can start to visualize that with your breath, you are stoking a little fire at the base of your pelvic bowl. And as you continue to breathe and visualize this fire, allowing it to be stoked by your breath. And with your attention, your focus, your presence, sending the energy of that fire into your genitals, perhaps down your legs, filling your pelvic bowl with fire, with sacred fire. Just notice with your breath that you can control how big that fire is building and where that heat is going. You might also experience other sensations, tingling, or fluttering, or throbbing. And even if you're not, that's okay too. Just notice where your mind, your focus, and your presence is. As you breathe in and stoke your fire, just offering some love to your sacred fire, some love to your genitals, thanking them for all the creative energy they produce, the pleasure they produce, for the life energy they produce. You can place your hands on your lower belly. You can cup your genitals. Just noticing any sensations that arise. And noticing if they have a language. And even if you can't decipher right now, it's a practice and you can come back to it at any time. You can learn the language of your yoni, your lingam, your genitals. You can speak to them and bring more excitement, more arousal, more pleasure to your whole body. And going ahead and just thanking yourself for your presence. and for wherever your body was at with this mini practice. And whenever you feel ready, go ahead and open your eyes to come back, taking all the time you'd like.
Thank you so much for that. It's so beautiful.
You're welcome.
Wow, I really didn't even know how much I needed that today. It's been a busy day, so this was so yummy.
Yes, love it. Love it. We have the power all right there, don't we? Just the power is right there. Just tap in, tune in, decipher the code, decipher the language.
I really love that. So many parts of it when you were asking us to listen to the language of our yoni or lingam or genitals, like that's such a that was so beautiful to have it phrased that way and to really pause and listen to the wisdom of our sex.
Yeah, when I first heard that, I was like, huh? And then I heard it. And then I heard it and I was like, oh my gosh, she's speaking to me and it sounds like fluttering. Oh, she's thumping at me today. Today she's thumping. And just really starting to decipher the language.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah, really special. And the power of our senses, like the power of our sensations to bring us to presence is really, really powerful and really it's a really simple tool that's just always there for us to access.
Yes, absolutely. And the genitals and the mind, the brain and the genitals are intimately connected. Intimately connected.
I love that. And right. And we think of it, how separate our minds are from our sex, like in, in most of our worlds. And so we get to work on not only merging, but really strengthening the connection between mind, heart, and sex. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Amazing. So I always love to, before we tell our listeners where they can find you and learn more about your work, I always like to ask our guests. So the Love Deep Lab podcast is about sex, science, and sacredness. So Rakaya, just kind of like a speed round of questions I'm going to ask you right now, today, in this moment. What makes you feel so sexy?
What makes me feel sexy is when I give myself permission to be sexy. Oh my gosh, it's so simple sometimes. It's like, wait a minute, I don't have to look for that outside myself. I get to give myself permission for that. And some of the most profound tools and techniques that I found are breath, sound, and movement.
Beautiful.
And allowing my sexiness.
You're so damn sexy.
So are you.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. And what part of science, so the mind, the body, whatever, anything that like lights you up right now that gets you excited to learn about and practice yourself, any aspect of science that lights you up?
I have been absolutely passionate about the neurobiology of how the interconnectedness between mind and body, and how we can literally change our story, change our future by continually rewiring the neuronal patterns in the brain, in the mind. Amazing. So that's what fascinates me. Magical. That's what I love to talk about and teach my clients how to do and take my clients through the processes around that.
So beautiful. And it's such an incredible alchemical marriage between the science and the magic of sacred sexuality. So
absolutely. Beautiful. Yes. Yes.
And the last question for you is, what right now in your life just feels so sacred to you?
You know what? I have been on mostly a solo journey when it comes to sacred sexuality. And I find that I'm in a very beautiful place right now where I'm holding myself in a very sacred space. I recently broke up with my partner. And so I'm honoring all that I get to go through and holding myself and my own sexuality sacred as I start to just stick my toe in the water with dating again and exploring with other people. And I'm really enjoying taking, like yesterday, I had a huge sex magic ritual. It was like an hour and a half or 2 hours long. And I was like rubbing ash on my body and oils and chanting, and all of these things were happening. And it was just like, dang, I think I'm in love with this.
Oh, that's so beautiful. So, I totally celebrate that as sacred. That's beautiful.
Really taking the time to create those rituals for myself is what's really sacred to me.
And there is so much power to ritual and symbolism and token and ceremony that we just can lose sight of. Like I said, in our busy, over-programmed, and my life can be that way too, but to really come back to the power and simplicity of ritual and ceremony and symbol is so beautiful.
Yes.
Awesome. And how can our listeners and our watchers find you, follow you, learn more about the amazing work that you are doing in this world?
Yeah, thank you. So my website is currently under construction, but they can at least track me that way. They can get my email and my phone number. That is sacredfirementoring.com. Mm-hmm. And also on Facebook, Sacred Fire Mentoring is my Facebook page. So they can reach me either of those ways.
Beautiful. And that will be in the show notes and in the L3s. So I highly recommend that you follow along with Rakaya. I have gotten the privilege of working with her myself in different group settings here in Utah. And she's amazing. So I highly recommend you follow along.
Thank you, Stormy.
And thank you, Rakaya, for sharing time today and leading us in a practice. And I look forward to so many more collaborations.
Yes, likewise. Thank you so much for having me today. It was a blast connecting with you.
And thank you to our listeners and our viewers. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being just courageous and listening and putting your toe or your whole body into the world of sacred sexuality. And thank you for being brave and opening your hearts to love, deep,